My name is Sheila. I'm sitting in my cozy one-bedroom apartment in Millbrook, a far cry from the homeless shelter I once called home. The silence here is a luxury. No one prying into my life, no one sabotaging my chances. But it wasn't always like this. 3 years ago, I was on the verge of losing hope. I'd applied to countless jobs, and every single time, I was met with rejection. By the age of 27, I found myself in a homeless shelter, washing my hair in a gas station sink, and surviving on one meager meal a day. All because my parents, Frank and Lily, had been calling every employer I applied to, telling them I had a criminal record when I'd never even had a parking ticket. Let me take you back to my hometown, Riverdale. It's a small town with a population of around 3,500. There's a single grocery store, a high school, and a diner that's been serving the same apple pie since 1990. Everyone knows each other, waves from their front porches, and can tell if a stranger's car is parked in the wrong spot. My parents, on the surface, were well respected in the community. Frank was a mechanic at the local auto shop for over 20 years before it closed down. Lily volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. People used to look at our family and say, "That's how you raise a daughter, right?" But behind closed doors, it was a different story. I didn't get my own house key until I was 21. I couldn't go out with friends without a strict curfew and constant check-ins. When I was 15, I started working as a cashier at the local convenience store after school. The minimum wage paychecks went straight into a joint bank account that Lily opened, claiming it was for my safety. I never saw a statement, never questioned it. That was just how things were. I graduated as the valedictorian of my class. I had a teacher who encouraged me to apply for college scholarships. I brought the brochures home, excited about the possibilities. But Frank just scoffed and said, "College is a waste of time. You can learn a trade right here in Riverdale." So I stayed. I cleaned the house, did the laundry, and listened to Frank complain about the state of the world at dinner every night. And every night, he'd tell me, "You've got a roof over your head, food on the table, and a family. What more could you want?" But on the week of my 26th birthday, something inside me snapped. I was standing in the kitchen, washing dishes, and the thought hit me like a ton of bricks. I was going to be 40, still doing the same thing, living under their control. That scared me more than anything. The next day, I went to the town library and used one of the old, sticky, keyboard computers. I created a new email address and found a job listing for a sales position at a bookstore in Oakwood, about 25 minutes away. I typed in my application and hit send before I could talk myself out of it. 2 days later, I got an email back. They wanted to interview me. I was so nervous, but it was also a glimmer of hope. That night at dinner, something felt off. Frank sat at the head of the table, reading the newspaper, and barely looked at me. Lily was unusually quiet while she washed the dishes. The next morning, I drove to Oakwood for the interview. The manager was nice at first, but then his face dropped. "Sheila," he said, "I'm really sorry, but someone called yesterday and said you have a history of theft. We can't take the risk." I was devastated. I drove home in silence, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Over the next few weeks, I applied to more places: a coffee shop in Pineville, a clothing store in Elmwood, and a bakery in Meadowbrook. Every time I got an interview, but every time they canceled within a couple of days. One night, after the bakery rejected me, I decided to look through Lily's desk. I found a small red notebook. In her neat handwriting, she'd listed every place I'd applied to, with little red crosses next to each name. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. My own mother was sabotaging my life. The next day, I confronted them. I threw the notebook on the kitchen table and demanded an explanation. Lily started crying, saying it was because she loved me and the world out there was too dangerous. Frank just told me to stop being ungrateful. When I said I was leaving if they didn't stop, he said, "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. You'll have nothing." I thought he was bluffing, but he wasn't. That night, I packed a single backpack with a change of clothes, a toothbrush, my phone charger, and a photo of my grandmother, Clara. When I opened the front door, Lily was standing there, her eyes cold. "You're dead to us," she said. Frank stood behind her, arms crossed. I walked out with only $15 in my pocket and a phone with 10% battery. I had no ID because they'd kept my birth certificate and social security card. I went to the gas station on the edge of town and sat on the curb. And then the text started coming in from Frank. Come home and apologize, and we'll forgive you. After a couple of days, a kind-hearted cashier at the gas station told me about the Riverdale Community Shelter. It was a converted old warehouse, smelly, and filled with fluorescent lights that buzzed all night. But it was a roof over my head. I started the long process of replacing my documents. I applied for a new birth certificate and tried to get a temporary ID, but it was a long and frustrating journey. I also continued to apply for jobs, this time in towns farther away, thinking distance would solve the problem. But I was wrong. One time, I applied for a hostess job at a restaurant in Cedarwood, 40 miles away. I got an interview, borrowed a nice blouse from another shelter resident, and took the bus early in the morning. Just a few days later, the manager called to say they'd changed their minds because they'd received an email with what looked like a police report about me. I was so tired of fighting, but then something unexpected happened. One morning, a woman named Rita knocked on the shelter door. She was in her mid-50s, with short gray hair and a no-nonsense look. She said, "Your grandmother Clara hired me to find you." She set down an old brown leather briefcase on my bed. On it, written in Clara's handwriting, were the words for Sheila, when she's ready. Rita explained that Clara had hired her 12 years ago, when I was 14. She'd paid a retainer for a decade of periodic surveillance on my parents. Rita had been tracking my parents' calls to employers for 2 years and had records of all the lies they'd told. She opened the briefcase. Inside, there was a sealed letter from Clara. It said how sorry she was that she couldn't stop my parents while she was alive. She'd sold her small farm 10 years ago for nearly $280,000 and put the money in a trust that became irrevocable upon her death. The sole beneficiary was me. There was also a thick manila folder filled with evidence, recordings of Lily's calls, fake police reports created by Frank, and screenshots of the emails. Rita said it was all admissible in court. With this evidence in hand, I contacted a lawyer, Mr. Harris, who Clara had recommended. He filed a lawsuit against my parents for defamation and interference with my job prospects. When the lawsuit became public knowledge in Riverdale, the town started to turn on my parents. People who used to be their friends started to question what they'd done. The grocery store clerk who used to be friendly with Lily now avoided her. Frank's old friends at the auto repair shop stopped talking to him. The court granted a civil protection order against my parents. They were not allowed to contact me directly or indirectly. The defamation case moved forward, and with all the evidence Rita had collected, it was clear my parents were in the wrong. In the end, I won the case. The court awarded me $75,000 in damages, calculated from 3 years of lost income. My parents couldn't pay, so a lien was placed on their house. Eventually, they had to sell it and move to a trailer park outside the town. Frank never admitted he was wrong. He still tells people I was brainwashed by the lawyer. But Lily, on the other hand, started seeing a therapist on her own. She told Rita that she realized what a terrible thing she'd done. I'm still not sure if I'll ever forgive them, but I've learned that I don't have to. I'm working as an administrative assistant at Mr. Harris's law firm now. I'm saving up to go to community college. I have my own apartment, a used car, and a cat I named Clara after my grandmother. I'm sharing my story not to make you hate my parents, but to let you know that wanting a life of your own isn't a bad thing. Walking away from those who try to destroy you is an act of self-preservation. And sometimes, like my grandmother Clara, real love means making a plan for someone's freedom, even if it takes a lifetime.